Hello everyone, this is Kaushik Kumar from SRIRAM Law Academy, and in this video I'm going to be discussing a certain question that must be on a lot of your minds, and that question is, should I drop a year for CLAT? Now I'm sure a lot of you have gotten your CLAT results back and are considering the possibility of dropping a year to attend CLAT again next year. Now, when you are considering this possibility, I just want you to keep one thing in mind firstly, is that dropping a year doesn't necessarily amount to losing a year, but it's giving you the opportunity of possibly gaining a lifetime, which is so radically different to what you would get otherwise. Because the life trajectory that your career might take after graduating from a top premier NLU could be something which is so radically different and so completely far off from what you would be getting otherwise. So just keep that in mind when you are making the decision. And now I'm going to be talking about a few things which will be helpful if you have the additional time, if you do decide to drop a year for CLAT. Right? So the first thing that you need to keep in mind is that, as you all know, there is a new pattern for CLAT which was started this year. And there has been increased emphasis on the fact that they need students who are good at skills. And this is no longer, and this has never been and will never ever be a knowledge-based assessment. So they do not care about how much you know. It's about how well you are able to adapt to new situations, apply certain principles to different facts, and be able to analyze and critically evaluate certain key pieces of information that is being provided to you. And those are the kinds of skills that you will be tested on in CLAT. Like you all know, skills like reading skills, critical reasoning skills, logical reasoning skills, and quantitative skills. So all of these point to the fact that skills are something which you cannot learn as such. Now, skills are something which are developed over the period of time by consistently practicing it. So skills is not something which you can learn overnight. So the additional time that you might get by deciding to drop a year for CLAT would be really, really helpful in developing your skills, especially for this huge chunk of the exam, which is solely based on your skills, right? And automatically, if you're able to improve your skills, your score will equally improve, because as you all know, a huge part of CLAT is formed up by the legal reasoning, the English, and the logical reasoning sections in the exam, right? So it's about the fact that you are preparing yourself the best to be able to do well in the majority of the part of the examination, wherein you will be able to maximize on your abilities and maximize the results that you will get by focusing on these particular skills, right? So it's not a matter of quantity as such, it's more about the quality of the preparation that you are putting into, right? So it's not about doing 1,000 or 2,000 mocks, it's just about doing enough so that you know you have improved your skill from where it was before, and being able to target and actually face difficult mocks and difficult questions which will put a lot of other people in trouble, right? So this is something which you can keep in mind, which you need to keep in mind, especially because this is not something which can be done overnight. So this is something which takes a lot of time, which takes a lot of effort, and this additional time that you might have if you decide to take a year off for CLAT will be really, really helpful in developing these skills, because like I just told you, skills are not something which can be learned. It's something which is developed. It's something which is practiced. It's something which is inculcated in you just by nature of habit, right? Now, the next thing that you need to keep in mind is about the current affairs section. Now, this is something which I know could be challenging for a lot of you, just because of the wide and the vast nature of the subject that is covering the different kinds of topics that can come under the ambit of current affairs, right? So for this, your approach should not be looking at it as a task or a chore, but you need to start looking at it as something that you need to enjoy. Because it's a simple fact that once you do become a lawyer, or even as a law student, you will be expected to know about the ongoings in absolutely every different part of the world regarding any subject whatsoever, which is generally considered to be extremely important, right? So as a lawyer, you are expected to have this knowledge, not only as a law student, but even once you start your career, right? So this is something which is preparing you for being a good quality lawyer even after you finish your undergraduate degree. So this is something which will go on for a long time, and that is why your approach towards current affairs should be one of not looking at it as a task or a chore, but trying to enjoy it and use it as an opportunity to be able to get yourself and make yourself a lot better. Because once you start doing that, once you start enjoying it, the amount of time that you spend reading newspapers and actually preparing for current affairs will become a very easy task, and you start doing it much more often. And when you do it much more often, the scores will automatically come to you, because there is no need to worry about how well you're doing, because if you start enjoying it, you automatically start doing well, because you start spending more time and you start putting in a lot more effort into that, right? So that is that about current affairs. Now, the next section, which I'm sure a lot of people are worried about, is that of quantitative techniques. I know math is not a strong suit for a lot of people, and it doesn't have to be. CLAT doesn't expect you to have high-level mathematical understanding, right? So we're talking about maths, which are basic techniques and basic theories which you have already learned. So these are things which you have already learned in school when you were in 8th and 9th grade, right? So this is something which you can go back on and understand that this is something which you have already completed before, right? And this, for maths, there is just one single option of doing well in it. It is consistent practice. And as you all know, the more you solve problems, the more you solve difficult problems, quantitative techniques will be something which is so easily cracked, and the additional time that you have can really be helpful in being able to understanding the concepts and being able to practice a lot more for more and more difficult topics, or specifically aspects which you find difficult, right? And finally, one thing I would like to mention with regard to CLAT is that there is a tendency among students to hoard a lot of material from various different sources, because they believe that the more material they have, the higher they will score. But do not consider that as an option, because I will tell you why. Less is definitely more for CLAT, because if Sriram provides enough material for you and enough basic material for you to be able to prepare for CLAT and crack CLAT, right? So you have your newspapers, you have the material that you get from Sriram, and you get the various mocks that you are presented with by Sriram. All of this is more than enough for you to be able to crack CLAT, because this is not an exercise of getting a wide variety of material, right? So it's not a question of how much material you have, it's a question of what you do with the material that you are provided. And that is where two different aspects of your work need to shine and need to be really on top of your game to be able to crack CLAT. And that is, the first one is hard work. Now that is something which is so obvious to you, because obviously hard work is what is going to get you to be able to crack CLAT, and that is automatically translates to working consistently, working like regularly, and working for enough hours to be able to actually use all the material and to be able to understand what is given in them and get the best out of that, right? So that is hard work. That is something which you need to be able to crack CLAT, and that's something which all of you know already, because I'm sure a lot of you have already worked hard if you had given CLAT recently, right? Now the second thing that you need to be able to crack it is smart work, and that is something which is key, which is essential to be able to do well, because it is so very easy to get confused that, okay, you're working these many number of hours a day and that is enough for me to crack CLAT, because that is not it. Because you need to be able to identify your weaknesses, the aspects where you think you are going to be struggling, and those finessing and harnessing those particular aspects is what is going to get you to improve your scores. Because if you are already good at a particular subject, or if you're already good at a particular topic in a subject, you are going to do well in that, irrespective of how many mocks you do or how many practice papers you do in that subject. But it's all about focusing on the ones you think you are going to struggle in. It's about identifying your weaknesses, targeting that particular subject or that particular topic, and being able to force yourself to be able to prepare and be able to bring that up to the same level as to that of another subject which you feel a lot more comfortable in, right? And that is what we mean by smart work, because this is something which is missing in a lot of students, which is the reason why they're not able to crack CLAT, right? So they start focusing on things which make them feel good. They start focusing on things which they believe they're good at, so they continue working on that, but that doesn't help you in any way whatsoever. So keep these two things in mind when you are putting in the amount of effort that you do while preparing for CLAT. And also to keep this in mind while you're making the decision of whether you want to drop a year for CLAT or not. Now, I'm sure you've heard a lot of things about people who have dropped before, and you heard a lot of instances about people who've dropped before and then made it into a really top NLU, which are great examples. But I want you to remember that there are a lot of myths about dropping a year for CLAT, and that is something which I want to clarify right now. There are a few myths that droppers automatically become toppers, right? More time you have to prepare, the more marks you will automatically get. And there are a lot more percentage of droppers who crack CLAT. Now, all of these are myths which I want to clarify that these are definitely not true. Because just because you are a dropper doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be doing well in CLAT. And the numbers show that as well. Because I have seen a lot of students assume that just because they do drop, they believe that they are automatically entitled to a place in a top NLU, and they believe that they are going to make it into CLAT, and that overconfidence is what causes the downfall of a lot of people, right? And that overconfidence leads to complacency, and that is definitely not something that you want, because you need to be able to keep that sustained work effort and work ethic to be able to succeed in CLAT. And just because you have more time to prepare doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get more marks, because like I just told you, CLAT is not an exam which is questioning your knowledge, which is not testing your knowledge as such. So if it was a knowledge-based assessment, then yes, the more time you have, the more knowledge you will be able to gather, the more things you will be able to learn, and the more things you will be able to remember, yes. But CLAT is a completely different ballgame where it's a question of your skills. And if you have a lot of time, you have the opportunity of developing these skills, yes. But if you don't do it right, if you don't do it in the right amount of hard work and smart work like we just discussed earlier, that is not, you do not have a short opportunity of getting into a top NLU just because you have dropped it, right? And I have heard a lot of people assuming that just because people have dropped out, there are higher chances of you getting into an NLU because the percentages work that way. It clearly doesn't, because there are a lot of dropouts. Like there are a lot of people who've dropped a year, but at the end of the day, still not being able to make it into a top NLU once the CLAT results are out. So I want you to remember that all of these myths do not exist, right? And it's solely dependent on how much you are able to maximize the amount of time that you have. And it's about being able to put in the requisite effort, especially when at a time you know that you've already done this before, because that is the most difficult aspect. Because if you already prepared for something before, let's assume that you're giving CLAT for the second time, right? In that case, you believe that, okay, you've done reading comprehension before, you've done logical reasoning before, you've done syllogisms, you've done logical fallacies, all of this before, you tend to skip through it. You tend to be like, okay, this is something which I know, this is something which I'm comfortable with, I'm going to go right through to the next one. So that kind of complacency is not something which you can let set through, because at the end of the day, you need to make the most of the time that you are provided, because the competition is immense. And you need to be able to be at the top of your game on the day of CLAT, so that you give yourself the best chance of making it into a top 10. Now, having clarified the myths about dropping a year for CLAT, at the same time, there are a lot of legitimate concerns that a lot of students have when they are considering the question of whether I should be dropping a year for CLAT or not. And one of those first concerns is, what would people say? And this is something which is not just for CLAT, it's just something which is pervasive all throughout the Indian society. And I do not blame you for thinking that way, because it's something which we are hardwired to think about. But I want you to always remember that nobody else can be the judge of your journey. So this is something which you are working hard for, you are putting in the requisite effort, and you are working those long nights, you are putting all of that practice and thought into what you have to do, how you have to do it, and you are the one doing everything, and this is your experience as such. So what other people say should not factor into your decision at all. And I know it is difficult, but this is something which you need to keep in mind while trying to make your decision, because you need to be oblivious to the white noise that is surrounding you, because it's going to happen irrespective. The white noise is going to surround you even if you write CLAT just once, Even if you get into one of the top 3 NLUs in the country, there will still be white noise about how you could have done something else, or etc., etc. So that is something which you should try and tune out completely, because at the end of the day, this is your experience, this is your journey, and this is something which you as a person have put in all the effort and all your hard work towards. So this is something which you should only be the judge of, and you should make the decision solely on what is happening inside of you and what you were thinking inside of you, rather than what other people might say. Right? So that's the first thing I'm sure a lot of people have thought of already. Now the second thing is, what if I don't make it? Or what if I lose a year and I don't get into a top NLU? Now this is again a legitimate concern, I understand, because dropping a year, especially in India, is something which is really difficult for people to grasp the concept of. And I understand that this is something which is a really difficult thing to consider, considering the stakes are so high. Because if you miss out on one of the top NLUs, then this is something which could potentially affect you very much, because of the amount of work that you've put in and the expectations that you have set yourself. And I understand that. But what you need to keep in mind is that the fear of failure is not something which should keep you away from, which should not keep you away from trying to achieve your goals. Because you can use that fear to motivate yourself to do more and move towards a situation where you feel that, yes, more than the fact that I fear I might miss out on a good NLU, I am looking forward to the opportunity of trying to get that life and that career for me. So this is something which you need to tune your mindset towards, to be able to be a lot more confident in your abilities and trust in the fact that you will be able to put in the requisite hours, the amount of effort, the technical knowledge that you will need to be able to succeed in all of this. So these are things which you need to be able to motivate yourself, because that at the end of the day is what is going to determine whether you're going to be doing well or not. External factors, what people are going to be saying, what's going to happen, what are people going to think of me, all of this is good enough for an emotional reaction in the beginning. But finally, what is going to keep you sustained throughout the period that you are preparing for CLAT is something which is going to be coming from within yourself, and that self-motivation is what is going to lead you towards your success. So always keep that in mind and try to ignore what is happening around you and what people are talking about. So just try to look inwards at all times and think what personally you would want and what you think is the right way to achieve the goals. Now, so the essence of this video as such is not to tell you that you should drop a year or that you should not drop a year. But if you do consider that you want to give it another shot, that you want to give it another opportunity, like I told you before, dropping a year is not exactly losing a year. It is an opportunity that you're giving yourself to be able to gain a great career ahead in the rest of your life. So that's something which you do need to keep in mind. So there's one anecdote or one example that people always tell you, and that holds true for almost all situations. So be like the river, continue flowing, irrespective of what is happening, irrespective of what people are doing to the river, people are doing, trying to stop it, trying to play in it, trying to worship it, whatever, the river continues flowing, right? So try to be that, try to emulate that, and try to continue going towards your goals and achieve it at all costs. And that is what you need to keep in mind. So try to motivate yourself to be able to do that on a regular basis and keep that sustained effort of doing that hard work and the smart work. And at the end of the day, if you make the decision of dropping a year for CLAT, that is not necessarily a bad thing or something which needs to be looked down upon. That is something which can potentially give you so much more in life than if you had decided to just live with what you had gotten earlier, right? And that is why I'm telling you that at the end of the day, it is going to be your decision, and it has to be your decision if you want to drop a year for CLAT or if you do not. But if you do, there are a lot of benefits associated with it. There are some myths which I've just clarified, which are not going to be, there's nothing which is going to be handed out to you just because you have dropped a year. The effort still has to come from you. And if you believe that you can do that, and if you believe you have the confidence in yourself to be able to do that, which I believe everybody should have, because you need to trust in your abilities. And if you're able to do that, you should make the decision for yourself and be able to stick with it, because there are a lot of benefits that could potentially come with sticking with that decision and going ahead with topping your field. So thank you very much for listening to all of this. I will end this session. I will end this video now, and hope to see you all soon.